Well, first of all, let's get this out of the way instantly. If FNAF was real, it would be horrible. Just straight up. 5 kids would have gone missing in one of their locations and the company probably would have closed down. But let's assume that people would still end up going, whether it's because they didn't believe the lies or thought that the government made it up, or because it's their choice, or because they're a YouTuber who wants views. Why are you looking at me like that? Well, assuming that people still went to the restaurant because perhaps maybe they vanished around the area instead of inside the place, what would it be like to live in a real Five Nights at Freddy's? For a kid, it would be pretty awful, but you also wouldn't know it. The world would be dangerous and anyone could be William Afton's next victim, but you wouldn't know that there was a serial killer on the loose with murderous animatronics able to disguise themselves and hide in plain sight that are willing to kill at any moment. But I mean, like, to be fair, that's also like real life, minus the animatronics. For adults, if you have kids, you may be worried. I mean, any parent is always worried about their kids, but if there was a group of kids who went missing in your area, I'm sure that there would at least be a small amount of paranoia. And honestly, it would be reasonable. I mean, I grew up in a house where my father was always worried. So much so that my sister couldn't walk up to her friend's house up the street without him watching to make sure she was okay. And while that would probably be extreme for most parents, if there was a very real threat of kidnapping, I'm sure that there would be a lot of curfews. For the sake of this entire thing, we also have to assume that the police didn't investigate the interiors of the animatronics themselves, despite them smelling like death and leaking body fluids, including blood. Since that's something literally anyone with common sense would check when investigating the disappearance of children and then learning that animatronics are leaking blood and smelling like a dead body. But what of the technology that we see in these games? Would animatronics that can alter their appearance be realistic? No. Of course not. The spring-locked suits, the illusion discs, the twisted animatronics, and the like are all extremely improbable considering the actual technology of not only our time, but the 80s when this would have normally taken place. At least, if we have a rough idea of the timeline, which honestly at this point, we could be totally wrong about the timeline. The technology in the games is so highly advanced that we have absolutely no idea what else they could have access to. They could have smartphones in the 80s for crying out loud. And if they don't, then William should have capitalized on that rather than murdering countless innocent kids, because he could have literally been a billionaire. The highly advanced technology would have to be disregarded in terms of the abilities of William Afton, so while this seems like a fight that nobody could really win, realistically, it wouldn't be as bad as we think, at least in those terms, since even Chuck E. Cheese, the closest thing to Freddy Fazbear's in our world, obviously, still only has the most simple robotic abilities known to man, despite the popularity of Five Nights at Freddy's and their ability to capitalize on that trend by taking some of those concepts, like the advanced robotics, not the dead kids, and then converting them into real life, because like the concepts in the actual pizzeria, not having kids go missing, like I said, that's a bad idea. Although based on comments left on previous videos, especially about how a real-life Freddy's would happen, there have been plenty of people that are willing to die, or more likely to go to Chuck E. Cheese if it was more dangerous for some reason. Y'all are weird. But one final query. How would YouTubers handle it? Clearly, there are YouTubers in this world thanks to the mention of Matt Pat, or at the very least Game Theory in the Fazbear Frights books, so what of the others? Well, we would most likely not be talking about FNAF. Something that I'm sure a lot of you would enjoy, but also something that you wouldn't be aware of, which is a whole other can of worms that I won't be getting into today, because you wouldn't know about FNAF because FNAF wouldn't be a thing. However, I'm sure that there would be plenty of true crime and conspiracy YouTubers heading to a or the same Freddy Fazbear's where the kids went missing in order to solve the case, or really just talk about it and get nowhere with it. Sounds like someone I know. Since they don't have the clearance or the equipment to do an actual investigation, or on a potentially closed case. Shane Dawson would 100% have gone there for that same conspiracy theory video, and the psychic twins would definitely have showed up at some point and definitely sensed something, but not quite known what it was. Ooh. MatPat may have made a food theory video about it because he made a food theory video about Chuck E. Cheese, but the thing is, these YouTubers coming to investigate, would they be William's next targets? It's an interesting question because as far as we know, he's only killed one adult, and that was Henry. Every other victim has been a kid, so while they may be in more danger, there would clearly be a bigger issue in trying to deal with these YouTubers, especially if they get killed or die mysteriously shortly after visiting a Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. It would probably start some form of curse rumor that would only get more people to go there to try to solve that case. But how would Freddy's have dealt with the pandemic? Would they have made enough to survive the years of quarantine? Or would they, like our Chuck E. Cheese, have to file for bankruptcy? Would they get to open their Pizzaplex? Or would some problematic tweets from William Afton rise and cause the restaurant to get cancelled for calling Chica a he? These are all good questions that we will never really have an answer for because, well, FNAF isn't real. And that's why people keep commenting that nothing in these videos is scary. No, it's not real. Can't actually hurt you. That's why it's not scary. Scary is subjective. Just relax.
In a 10 pirate ride. Given that this is already in the style of a game in FNAF VR, certainly does help in porting this to an arcade cabinet, but there would be some things that they'd have to change, like turning it into one of those like classic shooter arcade games where the screen scrolls as you fight off bad guys threatening innocent civilians, and it tells you what to shoot and what not to shoot. Yeah, that's the kind of arcade game I see this as, except instead of scrolling sideways, it moves forward like the cart does in the ride in FNAF VR. It could just be a simple aim and shoot kind of thing, but maybe they could add some animatronics sneaking in and throwing some cake or pizza at you that you'd have to shoot to block. This would be in order to end the game early, so that you'd then have to pay more tokens, or just straight up money depending on how the system was run, but based on modern practices I think it would be a token system because it probably would end up making them more money in the long run. And at 9, Fun with Plush Trap. Fun with Plush Trap is a simple game that would operate much like it did in FNAF 4 for the arcade cabinet. Despite having more of a presence in FNAF VR, the simplicity of the controls in FNAF 4 would be exactly how this game operates, just in an arcade cabinet, which would require you to just push a button to get the light to shine, and then you let go of it to turn it off and allow Plush Trap to move, giving you the 60-second countdown to a jump scare if you fail to stop him before the timer, or if he gets to you before you stop him. It's a simple game with a simple premise, but it would work incredibly well for an arcade machine, and I think plenty of people would play it. And maybe you could have like multiple levels like Donkey Kong style, with various smaller nightmare animatronics like Fun with Nightmare Balloon Boy, Fetch, Mini Arenas, etc. Assuming that Plush Trap isn't a form of Fetch already. And today, Plush Babies. The 2 Plush Baby mini games where you have to look around for the various somehow animated baby plushes before they get to you is an interesting concept that with some tweaking could work for an arcade cabinet. It would require a joystick as the spotlight following the joystick, you just move it around to move the spotlight, but it's something that I think would work kinda well, but it would have to be done right. I don't know exactly what done right would look like. I'm an ideas guy, okay, I'm not a programmer, but I'm sure that it wouldn't be that difficult to work out, I hope. It wouldn't be as detailed or scary as the main minigame in FNAF VR, but it would still be something that would work decently well. It may not be the most popular game at the arcade, but that's why you have multiple levels including the hard mode one and the DLC one in the pumpkin patch. Plus, that's why it's only number 8, because it would be harder to get done properly. And it's 7, Happiest Day. The Happiest Day minigame is some of the most important lore and moments in the series, with the original missing children from the first missing children's incident from 1985 getting their souls released, showing that there are multiple ways to deal with what would later be called Remnant, the infusion of metal and soul, or rather metal and extreme emotion, or maybe in Springtrap's case, metal. Get it? Because his human meat is also in the suit. Never mind. Either way, the Happiest Day minigame is not a simple one-shot minigame. There's some build-up to it. It's like the main story of FNAF 3, so seeing those various minigames and glitches come together into a single arcade cabinet would be a beautiful sight. Almost as beautiful as Glamrock Chica. I mean, as my idea for a real FNAF pizzeria, which you should go totally watch, by the way. It's in one of the corners. I don't know which one anymore. And at 6, Claw Machine. This is pretty dark, but you people seem to love that kind of thing. So what about a claw machine that was designed to be Baby while she was grabbing Elizabeth? Is that too far? Like a claw machine that's built to look like the baby animatronic on the outside with a window on the stomach where the claw would come out. And that's where the claw machine is. I think that would not only be a fun way to make it a FNAF themed claw machine, but it would also be dark as hell, and I love that kind of thing. Plus, it's about a fictional death, so it's not really distasteful. The idea also stands that this is something out of the box for this list, and I wanted to see what you thought about it, rather than just ranting on about the various minigames in the series for 10 minutes. However, it's time to get back to that, so moving on. Halfway through in at number 5, Corn Maze. Corn Maze is one of the most stressful games in all of FNAF VR, compared only to the likes of the hallway from that very same DLC. Corn Maze revolves around you walking through a maze made of walls, not corn, for some reason, in search of colored keys. These keys unlock their respectively colored gate and result in you winning. However, Grim Foxy is chasing you and he always knows where you are. The only way to really get him off your tail, pun intended, is to hide behind cardboard cutouts after he notices you. The maze is also filled with clusters of crows that will alert Foxy to your location if stepped on, which will result in him finding you faster, as well as scaring the living hell out of you. This game, in the same vein as the Help Wanted flat mode version, but controlled with a joystick and buttons, would work incredibly well, and you wouldn't have to find all 4 keys to unlock a secret one. You just don't have a secret one, and you're golden. Man, I'm a genius. In at 4, Security Puppet. Ah yes, Security Puppet. One of the 3 mini games required to play through to completion for the Lore Keeper ending of FNAF 6. And let's be honest, you should always play mini games through to completion, otherwise it's just mean. The Security Puppet minigame was pretty simple. Keep the assigned child away from the exit. However, the only catch is that there was no assigned child until the 3rd time booting up the game, where the child will already be outside, thus you failing. We know that this child is Charlie, who goes on to possess the puppet, and this was the only time we've seen a kill from 2 different angles. However, a game kind of like a Where's Waldo kind of thing with security bracelets seems like a wonderful and simple idea, especially when we know what the character is really trying to prevent. Would there be a green bracelet character, or would we only be looking for the green band? I don't know, it would be up to Scott. Also, Scott, or I guess whoever takes over next, please do this. Getting close to the end in at number 3, Deliver Pizzas. The mini game that opens FNAF 6 isn't like anything else we've seen. Okay, well, it's kind of like Take Cake, but this time you're throwing pizzas at kids' screaming faces, and honestly, I love that idea. The fantasy of throwing a pizza in the screaming kid's face has been present ever since those little buggers in my old building bounced their basketball off my door and made my dog go absolutely nuts. But even without my secret thoughts, this would still be a fun arcade game, and I'm not letting you fight me on this. The difficulty of the game was already defined even before the real FNAF 6 started, and it was cool. But then throw in added difficulty of it being a full game and you have a whole new experience. At least, I think it would be at least, so can't be sure unless we try. Penultimately, in at number 2, Midnight Motorist. Midnight Motorist is another one of those games that you could test in FNAF 6 that just feels right. The game is pretty simple, but it's certainly exactly what we need in an arcade cabinet at a pizzeria. A game for the short attention span of a child. You simply drive around until you run into 3 things, then boom, it's game over. You get tickets based on how far you went, or it's one of those lame ones where you don't get tickets at all because there's no feasible way to calculate that, which would also be kind of understandable. Or you just get 3. You know the ones I'm talking about. Midnight Motorist would make a good arcade game aside from the whole yellow guy mustard man debacle, so cut that part out and you're in the money, baby. Go forth and collect the king's tax of tickets and tokens. And finally, in at number 1, Fruity Maze. Fruity Maze, I think, was the obvious first choice here because while yes, the game does progressively get darker, it doesn't have to. You can stick to the original level 1 Fruity Maze motif, add a proper goal or objective, and then have a weird FNAF version of a Pac-Man style game. Boom, you're done. Just don't make it depressing and allow the player to continue as long as they can, just like a normal Pac-Man game would work, and you're good. And you're golden. Golden Bonnie, dare I say. And maybe throw in a certain level where it's like the messed up dog, flowers, and blood kind of thing, just to make sure it's authentic, because knowing these comments, you'll all be disappointed and even get mad if these things don't turn into something dark and twisted. I don't know about something like new being added to the series in the real world, but I don't know if you'd want that to be twisted and disturbing, like if it was a new arcade game, for example, but something like Fruity Maze, you'd insist on it. So yeah, I know you're all sick, and I love you for it. It came to me thanks to the Freddy and Friends On Tour episode 4 glitches that ended up revealing Glitch Trap when you assembled them like a puzzle, which I found out on my own despite people in the comments claiming someone on Reddit already did it. I couldn't find the post when I saw these comments, okay, so in my mind, I did it first. Anyways, this made me think about just what abilities Glitch Trap could have now that he's sentient code that can apparently possess people who put on a VR headset, and honestly, I think with that ability to possess people as code, not even as a spirit, just as code, makes him literally able to do anything. But if we want to keep at least some element of realism, we can say that he can possess people, but he would have to return to the game. He couldn't go directly from a person to something else, which would kind of make sense. Now, how could Glitch Trap operate post FNAF VR and prior to the release of Security Breach, since this theory doesn't really involve that game? Well, let's work backwards. What could cause Glitch Trap to appear in Freddy and Friends on Tour? Well, that show is clearly a riff on the Fredbear and Friends on Tour show that we saw hinted at in FNAF 4 on the TV, the same Easter egg that gave us the date of the game of 1983. And if we think about this and how it coincides with the Many Worlds interpretation, every possibility does exist. The Earth where the show is called Freddy and Friends also exists. This could be a way of signifying that this is in fact another Earth, since both shows seem to have a similar theme, with Fredbear in the original's case interacting with Foxy, and then clips of the various characters singing and performing, which follows the plot structure of the Freddy and Friends episodes, with characters running away from Foxy and then ultimately performing, eventually performing with him in the final episode. It's also worth mentioning that while we expected 6 episodes revealing all 6 numbers of the release date, with the final 2 being Roxy and Monty, we didn't get those. We got 4 episodes, stopping when the last animatronic from the original gang was in the thumbnail, meaning that there may not be anyone else, at least at the time. It's also worth noting that the website showcasing the latest episode, securitybreachtv.com, also has hidden messages around the desk if you hover your mouse in certain areas, with the majority of the screen being "Be careful," hovering over the phone saying "I thought I heard something," the Steelwool Studios logo saying "We know all," and the button to play the latest episode just having question marks. These are things that remind me of how psychic friend Fredbear would speak to us in the minigames for FNAF 4, only further solidifying the FNAF 4 connection. And you know, since I said it, I have to do it. He's here, he's there, he's everywhere. Who are you gonna call? Psychic friend Fredbear. So if this is FNAF 4's Fredbear and Friends cartoon, what would that mean? Well, my idea is like that of an old theory of mine, that the FNAF multiverse is beginning to expand as the release of Security Breach and ultimately the Fazbear Fanverse Initiative games draw closer. The Fazbear Fanverse Initiative, if you don't know or remember, being a collection of fan games that Scott funded so that they could get new installments or versions, along with helping the creators with merchandising and porting the new games into consoles and getting them on store shelves, which is incredibly generous. He was also staying out of the development process so that they could make the games they wanted. The games included our Five Nights at Candy's 4, the Joy of Creation Ignited Collection, Pop Goes Evergreen, One Night at Flumpty's 3, and Five Nights at Freddy's Plus, which is a reimagining of the original FNAF game, which is where I'm guessing this universe's timeline starts or builds off of, considering how Five Nights at Candy's relies on the FNAF story for its own story. The most notable one for me, personally, out of all of these games, is the Joy of Creation, and those of you familiar with the game may already know why. In the Joy of Creation, you play as Scott Cawthon and his family as they try and survive real-life FNAF animatronics, known as the Ignited animatronics. These are drawn to the house thanks to another character coming from the games, Michael. And since that game takes place in our world, in the real world, I think the groundwork is being laid for that story now. This game specifically needs to be remade since the assets that were used in the original were copywritten and found in the Steam library, etc. So they have to remake all the assets already. So remaking the story so Scott doesn't quit after FNAF 2 and instead retires before Security Breach is entirely in the cards. This game is also the outlier, the one that takes place in a world where FNAF is a game and not real, unlike Five Nights at Candy's. So making the world that game takes place in be this world would also be astounding for marketing. Scott retiring may not have actually been because he's tired of making games that aren't for his kids, or because of the whole donating to anti-LGBTQ+ politicians. It could have been pre-planned, and Scott used his cancellation as a way to get more eyes on his retirement. Since the story revolves around Scott retiring, and he now has, it's entirely possible that this game gets updated to involve this drama, especially because the animatronics and Michael will need a way to get out of the games. But how could they do that? It's extremely unrealistic, right? Like, how could game code suddenly break out of their game into our world and become sentient? You see where I'm going with this? Glitch Trap. he is the reason. He's the key to how this story could realistically, albeit somewhat unrealistically, work. Glitchtrap, being sentient code from the main FNAF universe, could use his control over the games and code to basically pull these characters out and put them into real endoskeletons or microchips and send them after Scott. And he could be testing these abilities, hence why Freddy and Friends is different to Fredbear and Friends, because he can't pull things over perfectly, which in turn would help explain the ignited forms of the animatronics. It also explains all the glitches in the episodes, with the other world, the actual FNAF world, breaking through. Hence why the scenes we see glitched through are actually taken directly from the trailers. And the only glitch that wasn't in the trailer? The Glitchtrap puzzle. But how could he have gotten here? How could Glitchtrap have gotten from his universe onto our YouTube? It's simple. Us. YouTubers like me who have played through the oh so famous FNAF VR. Since what happens at the end of the game when you collect all 16 tapes? You get assimilated by Glitchtrap and merge with him no matter what you do. And then where do you end up uploading the footage of you getting merged to? YouTube. Where did Glitchtrap pull the episodes of Fredbear and Friends to that caused them to get slightly modified because this isn't 1983? YouTube. We, as the player of FNAF VR and then the YouTubers uploading the gameplay, managed to get Glitchtrap onto our YouTube, and as such, he is now able to be the link between the universes, letting Joy of Creation Ignited collection to be updated and based on our real world. I personally don't think that Scott was really retiring. I believe that at least it started out as that plan, but maybe now he enjoys the life, so he may just stick to it. Who knows? Well, only Scott. And Scott Cawthon isn't known for talking clearly.